Women are significantly less likely to commit crimes than men. Only 7% of the world's prisoners are female. However, anyone who sits behind bars in Indiana Women's Prison, the toughest women's prison in the world, is always in danger, because such penitentiaries in the USA mainly house prisoners that have committed the worst crimes. In today's video, we show you what everyday life is like for the criminals there, and what kind of women are locked up there. You can expect tough inmates, fierce prison measures, and an insight into a life you surely don't want to lead. Before we start our day at Indiana Women's Prison, we'll give you a very brief overview of the prison. The Indiana Women's Prison opened in 1873 as the first all-women's prison in the U.S. not even 2 miles from Indianapolis, the capital of the state of Indiana. On average, about 600 women are incarcerated there, and it is also home to the only death row for women in the entire state. Among the female criminals, the most diverse population groups meet, which always leads to additional dangerous situations. But more about that later. Let's start with the daily life of the prisoners. This begins, as usual in prisons, in the early morning. Depending on what job the prisoners have in the penitentiary, about between 5 and 6 o'clock. Those who work in the kitchen and must prepare breakfast are roused from their sleep by the guards at 3:30 or 4 in the morning. The first thing guards do is search for forbidden items. As soon as the guards, yes, there are also male staff here, open the cells, the prisoners have to get up immediately. Simply lying in bed longer is not tolerated there. The strictness of the guards is apparent throughout the entire prison day. They decide when you have to be where, when you have to wake up and go to sleep, and even when the prisoners are allowed to talk to each other. About half of the women are housed in 3s or 4s in cells where there is no running water or toilet. Others with even more fellow prisoners. There is hardly any space for personal belongings. Air conditioning is also absent, although it often gets quite hot in the cells. When the sun shines strongly, temperatures of 35 degrees Celsius are not uncommon, which is why it can become very uncomfortable there, and prisoners regularly suffer from dehydration. There are also no buttons to inform the guards if, for example, one needs to go to the bathroom. Instead, inmates have to knock on the doors and bars and hope that someone will come. After getting up, they go to the dining room for breakfast, for which the women have half an hour. Under supervision, of course. Then, it's time to go to work inside the prison. Each of the prisoners has a job. And there are various jobs. Those who are allowed to sew, work in the library, or cook in the kitchen are the lucky ones. Most of the jobs consist of cleaning the corridors, shower rooms and toilets all day, washing clothes, or polishing the guard shoes. From the money they earn, the women can then buy additional food in the prison store, but also stationery or new bras, for example. However, they only receive around $24 to $45 a month for their work, which is very little even by prison standards. Here are some examples that show how little it is. For example, prisoners have to work 4 days for a writing pad and 38 days for a bra. If there is not enough to do at the various workplaces, the women often receive only half their daily wages. By the way, those who refuse to work are punished by being put in an isolation cell where they have no contact with other inmates. But that's not all. Even those who don't do their work satisfactorily enough for the guards risk time in the isolation cell or at least a reduction in pay. After 6 hours of work, there is a break and lunch is served. However, this is no reason for joy. The food is anything but tasty. Most of it consists of a mass of soybeans used as cheap filling material. Although the inmates grow a variety of vegetables in the prison garden, these hardly ever end up on their plates. Instead, the prison administration donates the harvest to various food banks in the city that provide food to poor people. Because of the poor prison food, which lacks important nutrients, many of the inmates gain weight or develop diseases such as high blood pressure or diabetes during their time in Indiana Women's Prison. After the half-hour lunch, inmates continue to work for 2 hours and then have 3 hours of free time, which they are usually allowed to spend in the yard or play sports. Women who are mothers of young children and behave impeccably during their time in prison may also be allowed to live in the prison together with their children. They then generally have a more comfortable life behind bars, than the other prisoners. One example of this is Balbina Hernandez. The 34-year-old was pregnant when she was arrested for trafficking intoxicating substances and now faces 6 years in Indiana Women's Prison. Through the prison's 2007 measure, she was allowed to keep her daughter after she gave birth, who is now growing up with her mother in prison. Incidentally, the unusual program is having the desired effect. Women who participate in it usually cause very little trouble and make a special effort to work on themselves and continue their education so that they can live a proper life after their imprisonment. However, free time is actually the most dangerous time of the day for prisoners, because one must never forget. At Indiana Women's Prison, most women are incarcerated for very serious crimes. Among the current criminals in jail is Montserrat Shirley, an unscrupulous insurance fraudster who blew up a house in the middle of town, killing 2 people, damaging 80 other buildings, and causing more than $4 million in damage just to skim money from an insurance company. The fact that more people were not killed as a result of her actions is purely coincidental. The most notorious inmates in recent years have also included, for example, Paula R. Cooper, who took the life of a retiree in arguably the most brutal way possible just to steal $10 from her, and Brandy Worley, who deceitfully removed her own young children from her life just so her ex-husband wouldn't get custody of them. Some of the crimes of other inmates at Indiana Women's Prison are so bad that we can't even list them here as examples, because they can't be described in language that YouTube allows. Acts of violence and blackmail among the inmates are therefore a daily routine. And of course, there are conflicts between different population groups. Outside the prison walls, many female criminals are organized into gangs, and these gangs continue to exist inside the prison. And so, you can easily get into trouble there if you have the, in quotation marks, wrong skin color. In Indiana Women's Prison, the largest populations are blacks and whites, and there are few Hispanics or members of other ethnic groups. Regularly, inmates attack each other for this reason alone. Incidentally, racism is said to exist among the guards as well. For example, there are reports of white female officers who have their shoes polished exclusively by black female inmates at the prison. Incidentally, according to the prison's own description, Indiana Women's Prison is a modern prison that offers many educational opportunities and resources to help inmates integrate into society as best they can after their time in prison. However, many of the prisoners may not see the situation quite so rosy. Time and time again, they report mistreatment by the guards. For example, prisoners have protested about having to give birth to their children in prison while handcuffed and chained, of having their food portions allocated unfairly, or of being discriminated against because they are queer. Women with toothaches are said to have been instructed in some cases to simply sleep with a sock in their mouths, and although there is of course a doctor's station in the prison, many of the prisoners are denied visits there for health problems. At 5:30 p.m., it is time for dinner before the prisoners have to return to their cells. There, they are locked up by the guards, and at 11 p.m. at the latest, the lights have to be turned off and they have to sleep. At night, the guards patrol the corridors and repeatedly make surprise cell checks, or search the prisoners they rouse from their sleep. Inspections are possible at any time in Indiana Women's Prison. Sometimes, there are degrading measures, in which the prisoners must completely undress before all body openings are searched, as this former female inmate reports. And already in just a few hours, the day begins for the prisoners again, exactly like the previous day, over and over again. Because prison sentences of between 30 and over 100 years are not uncommon, many inmates will experience nothing else until their death, but exactly what we have described to you in this video. If you found this video interesting about a day in the toughest women's prison in the world, leave a like and subscribe to our channel. Bye and see you next time.